I thought the most essential way to look at these questions was kind of to go through a historical development of the Passover, beginning with the original Passover in Egypt. Okay. Even the name Passover, I think we've talked about it in the past, might not be the most accurate name for this holiday, but I'm leaving that aside. And to talk about the historical development of the Passover over the years, starting with the actual Passover in Egypt and moving on to the different manifestations of the celebration of Passover over the years in different and how it took different shapes and different angles with a changing of history, and was it celebrated all throughout history and so forth. So there are various approaches. As you know, I tend to combine uh, the traditional approach with a scholarly view and to kind of bring both worlds together. That's my attempt. And we'll talk about certain points. Generally, we'll start with the actual Passover of Egypt and how the Passover is a different kind of offering than other offerings, and what's the difference between the original Passover that was celebrated in Egypt at the eve of the Exodus, essentially, and how that is different than the tradition of Passover and the commandment of Passover that was commanded to be established as a generational commandment. Okay, we'll move on to the Passover in the wilderness, in the years of the wandering in the desert, because uh, surprisingly, maybe for many of us, the Passover was not celebrated, even though it was a commandment. Okay, I think the Bible is full of stories about commandments that have not been fulfilled. Okay, um, and then we move on to the period of the judges and first temple period, the period of the kings, and then second temple period. Maybe we'll be able to say a word or two about the Passover during the time of Jesus, and then the Passover in the uh, time following the destruction of the temple, the second temple. So that's the plan. Obviously, based on past experience, I don't know that we'll be able to see all of the things that we have, I want to talk about and that we want to talk about, but it's better to start and stop whenever uh, the time permits. We will have a break between the two meetings. I'm also adding the information about the next meeting, to the chat box, so you can take it from the chat box as well. And again, it's available in the WhatsApp or in other platforms as well. And again, I wholeheartedly invite everybody to come to that interesting meeting. And I'm interested to see how it's gonna fall out, how it's gonna happen, and what is going to be, in that meeting. I don't know. It's always good to have guests. Okay, so we've talked about the agenda. We've talked about the Passover from Egypt all the way to the Haggadah. Okay, and first of all, a little bit about the Passover. The Passover an offering is not the same as the other offerings in the Bible and in the Torah, and we have many ways to see the differences between the Passover and the other offerings of the Torah. The Passover is starts as a one-time event, not something that is regulated by time or by certain actions or by certain procedures. Okay, and then it becomes a commandment that is performed in the temple initially, and we'll talk about the differences between the um, Passover in Egypt and the Passover of generations. And it's basically a sign in Passover in Egypt for God to defend the houses or to pass over the houses. Here comes a discussion that we did in previous years. We're not going to do it this year. That is related to the meaning of the root Pesach. I am almost convinced, I'm not sure, that this is still available on my YouTube channel, where the root Pesach has a sense of limping, jumping, hence passing over. Okay, kind of limping or jumping, let's say jumping, hence pass over. That's the usual translation. But in the case of the Passover in Egypt or the Pesach in Egypt, the meaning has to do with defending, okay, rather than jumping. Again, not gonna address that. You might remember it from the past, and I think it's available on the YouTube. The other sacrifices are sin offerings if you commit a sin, burnt offerings usually on you've got the regular burnt offerings of every day, twice a day, then of Shabbat, of other appointed times, and so forth. We've got peace offerings, again, based on the goodness or kindness of one's heart or certain circumstances. Okay, it's eaten partly by the consumed, I should say, by the altar, by the priests, by the owners, the offerer, basically. And again, it is related to atonement, thanksgiving, vows, but it's not related to the covenant of the people of Israel with God. And the Passover is. And indeed, it is reflected also in the laws concerning the Passover. And we'll see that is partly the answer for the surprise that we've mentioned before, and that is the fact that the Passover was not offered in the wilderness. I saw a hand that was up before. Ulrike, you had your hand up.
We talked about the link.
Oh, the link. Okay.
That was my hand.
Very
But
good.
now Betsy is.
Betsy, yes. Thank you for asking the question. It led me to kind of make this.
It's wonderful. And I wanted to see it flow through time. So I'm so excited. But Netanel, what is this last comment here? Not on national identity.
As opposed to the Passover, which is part of the covenant of the nation with God.
Okay, the Passover is a national. This is for the children of Israel.
Right. The Passover is something that is specifically for the children of Israel, and we'll see that explicitly mentioned in Exodus 12:48, and how it reflects upon the wilderness as well. Because and I think you can guess or think, guys, about why. Because what is the ultimate sign of joining the people of Israel?
Circumcision.
Right. And Exodus 12:48 says, anyone who is uncircumcised, any foreigner, okay, cannot partake in the Passover. Okay, so these two commandments, the Passover and the circumcision, are the two positive commandments. And when I say positive commandments, I mean you have to do something rather than refrain from doing something, that are part of that covenantal relationship between the nation of God and God. Okay. So that's the nature of the Passover and how it differs from the nature of other offerings. Yes, Russ?
I was told once by a friend of mine when I went to a Passover celebration that years ago when I was a kid, that women who didn't have to be circumcised could attend a Passover. Is that true?
Women obviously do not, we don't do
Right.
female
So when
genitalia.
they invited me to the Passover, they said, "Oh, you can come because you're a woman." I don't know if they were joking or not.
I
They
think they
said
were
men
joking. Because
can't come because they're not circumcised, but women don't have to do
I
that.
think they
So-
had a good sense of humor, but remember that we're not sacrificing the Passover these days. Jews do not. Okay, Jews do not sacrifice the Passover. I was actually asked about it on TikTok. Okay, in response to one of my videos on TikTok, and I wrote that Jews nowadays, since the destruction of the temple, do not offer the Paschal lamb, do not sacrifice the Pesach. Okay. However, the Samaritans do. Okay, the Samaritans still do. It's a fascinating ceremony. If you happen to be in Israel during that time, it does not always correlates exactly to the date of the Passover, the Jewish Passover. Okay, and when you attend that ceremony, it's really fascinating. I think that we have mentioned that in the past. There are certain very interesting things that are worth looking at the ceremonies of the Samaritans, and specifically the Samaritans sacrifice is maybe what made Judaism so successful, and Samaritanism, if you will, so almost obsolete. Why? Because according to the Samaritans, who still have that practice, every Samaritan in the world, okay, will have to attend that ceremony. This year, that is like a day before, like if the Jewish Passover is going to be on Saturday night, right? Everybody's gonna have the Seder night on Saturday night, on Motzei Shabbat, and anyone living outside of Israel is gonna be punished by doing it again on Sunday night. Okay, Jews living outside of Israel actually they celebrate all the holidays, for 2 days. So the joke is that is the punishment for not making Aliyah is doing two of each holiday. Actually, having 2 Seder nights it has its advantages. For instance, you can do the first one with your family, as it is the tradition, and the second one with the community, with friends. This is something that is commonly practiced, but that's for Jews. And Gary's gonna do his Passover in California. I'm gonna do my Passover by my in-laws in the city of Ashkelon, and other people here are gonna have their Passover in different places all over the world. But the Samaritans, they must all come to Mount Gerizim to attend. So you cannot franchise, you cannot have a chain if you have to have only one location. It's very difficult, and this is what part of what Judaism did with Passover. Again, if we're looking at Passover through the years, and let's go and talk about the differences between the Passover in Egypt versus generational Passover. So the Passover in Egypt, as we said, was originally done. The lamb was taken, kept for 4 days, then slaughtered, and the blood was put over the doorposts, okay, and over the door in order to protect the houses, okay? Not getting into the philosophy, into the ritualistic context and so forth, but that's what it was. Everybody was in the house, okay? The blood was put on the doorposts. It was eaten in haste, and it's a one-time event. As we can see in Exodus 12, the laws for Passover for generations are based also on Exodus, but also in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. We can see that it is to be slaughtered in the temple. There is not yet temple, but in the place where God chooses or will choose, okay, will eventually choose, okay? And it happens every year. And you have to be pure for it. Obviously, the people in Israel, in Egypt, might not have been pure, okay? So, we said they have to take it on the 10th and keep it up until the 14th. There is no commandment to do that every year. But in Egypt, they had that commandment to take it on the 10th, okay? And to keep it on all the way to the 14th. This is also an interesting question. Why? Maybe because, as we know, for the Egyptian to have seen the Israelites taking something that was sacred for them and holding it by them and then slaughtering it was kind of iconoclastic or iconocidal, maybe even, if that's a word. But you get the idea. It's taking the idol and slaughtering the idol. Okay, we're not shattering the idol, hence iconocidal and not iconoclastic. Let's see this verse. Betsy, would you like to lead the way since you're the culprit for today's discussion?
I haven't read out loud in a long time, Netanel. I'll try. You've been gone a long time, Netanel. I know you're back. I know, but I've been at work. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
It's okay.
It's
right. Okay.
Go ahead.
Vehaya lakim lemishmeret ad arba'a asar yom lakodesh hazeh. Veshakatu oto kol kahal adat Yisrael ben ha'arba'im. And you shall
You've
keep
been
it.
practicing, even though you didn't do. You did a great job, and even though you haven't read aloud here for a while, I see you've been practicing.
I read it to myself, but not to other people. I do great when it's just me.
You should keep a candid camera, in your house, not knowing. I'll have someone
when it's
install
just
it.
me.
I'll have someone install it, but I'm not gonna say when and where. So you'll be reading. You don't know. Go ahead.
I know.
Go ahead.
And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to kill it at twilight. They each family killed their own lamb, Netanel, at the temple.
No temple yet. It's in
Oh,
Egypt.
tabernacle. Okay.
No tabernacle yet. Nothing. It's a domestic ritual.
Oh, Exodus 12. Okay.
Right.
Yes,
Exodus
sir.
12. No temple, no tabernacle. The people are in Egypt. They have been slaves until just a moment ago. Okay. This is essentially there are opinions in the Talmud that the plague of darkness came and was for 6 days between the 8th of that month all the way to the 13th. Okay, it was for 6 days. And so if we're talking about something that is done on the 14th, remember, there is the plague of the firstborns, and this is part of that plague of the firstborn, as this is supposed to protect the Israelites from being affected by that plague. Right? So no temple yet, no nothing. Okay. And the whole of Israel is gonna slaughter it ben ha'arbaim. Yeah, what is ben ha'arbaim is interesting. Not gonna get into it, but just so we get the idea, we said that we also have something that is uniquely observed only in the Passover that was done in Egypt, and that is here in this verse. Jackie, would you like to read, please?
Okay. Velahu mean Hadam. Yes, Hadam. Venatnu al Shatai Hamzoot.
Hamezuzot.
Sorry, Hemezuzot. Ve'al Hamashkof al Habatim Asher Yochlu Oto Behem. Moreover, they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they eat it.
Right. So again, something that is unique. You can see if we're talking a little bit about the language. Okay. So we have velakehu. It's a vekatal form. Okay. And venatenu, vekatal form. Both of them marking the regulations here. Okay, they should put it. Okay. And then we have yochelu, yiktol, part of this relative clause, asher yochelu oto bahem, in which, okay, asher yochelu oto, yochelu oto, they will eat it, and bahem goes back, retrospective pronoun, or basically an adverb that combines the independent pronoun with a preposition pointing back to the houses, in them, literally. So on the houses, that or which they eat it, in them, literally. In normal English, okay, in which they, of the houses in which they eat it. Okay, but Bahem points back to Habatim. Let's see another commandment that is related only to the first Passover, only to that Egypt Passover that happens only once. Okay. Yes, Net, I saw your hand was up before. Yes, so you have to unmute the mic.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I have. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I was reading ahead a little bit, and I don't mean to, maybe you're coming to this anyway, in chapter 9, verse 9. I'm looking at it on my smartphone. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled in water, but roasted over a fire. Now, did the ancient Hebrews on occasion eat meat raw? Did they eat? Was that allowable to eat uncooked food, uncooked meat?
So it's not just about the ancient Hebrews, it's generally about ancient people, I would say, or in the world of the Bible. Yes, in other cases you can eat in other ways, but in this case, ancient Hebrews are commanded not to eat. You can eat something raw, but you cannot eat the blood. So anyway, raw, only certain parts are relevant in that sense. But generally speaking, that part points there is a negation of certain ways, and it only leaves one way. By the way, very interesting to compare that verse 9, to other verses in the Bible, as well as Second Chronicle or the Book of Chronicles, and how it is there, because there is a very interesting example of what is called inter-biblical exegesis in regards to verse 9. We're not gonna deal with it now. Why? Because the commandment of eating the Bible, or the practice of eating the Paschal lamb only on fire, basically cooked by fire, is something that did not change. It's not a difference between the Egypt Passover and the generational Passover. So we're not gonna address that at the moment, but it's certainly interesting. So would you like to read as well?
Where do you want me?
On screen, Exodus 12:11.
Okay. All right, let me see. It's again like the others. I'm going to present my apologies first, and then we'll see what happens. V'chacha, toklu, oto, motnechem, haguron,
Hagurim.
yeah, hagurim, na'alechem, arag lechem, umakelchem, bayedchem, ba'akaltem, oto, bakipazon, Pesach, hu lakha
Ladonai.
Ladonai.
Ladonai, right.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
always
for
the simple things that are most like
Yes.
common things.
And you're rusty when it's very rusty. But I'm going to Seder Sunday evening at the synagogue in Columbia, South Carolina, and and so I will get some more practice.
Sure, sure.
Which I desperately need. Clearly.
Okay, very good. Maybe you'll how many people are gonna attend that Seder, for instance?
I don't know, but last time there were about 30. It's a Tree of Life congregation, and I think there'll be more. I suspect there'll be more this time. It was pre-COVID. That was the last time I participated, and yeah, it's been a while, so I'm looking forward to it. But it's just my wife and myself, so we haven't had our own private Seder. And I'll be asking you about when you're going to be doing courses. I'll be emailing you about that. So.
Okay. Yeah, things have to quiet down, but meanwhile we're keeping these going. So yes. something is there for us to practice. So the eating of the Passover in this fashion, okay, translated here in haste. I'm not sure it's the only possible translation. It's something that is unique for the Passover of Egypt. Russ, do you want to ask a question? Your hand is up.
Yes, I'm confused about the time frame. In the verse before, it said you will keep this for 14 days.
No, up until the 14th day of the month. Okay, so let's go back to this. Ad 14 yom lachodesh hazeh. Up until 14th day of this month, which means keep it until the 14th day of this month.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm still confused then, because I thought the people did it in one evening. I thought that the Lord was going to send the angel of death over the house to kill the firstborn of the Egyptians. And so I thought they put the blood on the doorposts of their house. They mixed up the bread, but they couldn't put leaven in it because they had to flee. So I thought they were just doing it for a few hours and then they would get out. But did they stay for a while then before they fled?
Just a second. The lambs were taken on the 10th of the month. This is in verse 3 of this very same chapter. I did not bring that verse. So you have two options. Either you believe me, or preferably you open your Bible to Exodus 12:3, and you'll see that God commands Moses and Aaron to tell the people that on the 10th of the month, they should take each a lamb for their extended family, for the house of their fathers. Okay, and then again, with a caveat of if it's a small family, you can join with the neighbors. And then in verse 6, which we read, it says that you should keep it until the 14th day. Okay?
So between the time that they did this preparation and the time that they actually started to leave Egypt, how long of a time do you suppose that was?
No, they took it on the 10th of the first month, right? And they slaughtered it on the twilight of the 14th. Okay? And the Exodus happened on that night. In the following day, it's a big discussion when exactly it happened. There are different verses in the Bible referring to different times of the Exodus. During the night, during the day, big discussion. Not today's discussion, though. Okay.
Okay.
Very good. So now a little bit about the things that should happen in the future Passover. And this goes back to our previous discussion about the nature of the Passover. And let's see this verse. Guys, I want to see some hands. Ulrike, please go ahead.
וכי יגור איתך גר ועשה פסח לאדוני הימול לו כל זכר ואז יקרב לעשותו והיה כאזרח הארץ וכל ערל לא יאכל בו. But if a stranger sojourns with you and celebrates the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near to celebrate it. And he shall be like a native of the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat of it.
Right. So you can see that the two commandments, the making of the Passover and the circumcision, himolo chol zachar, and then he becomes a native of the land. So there is a connection here between the Passover, the circumcision, and being a native of the land. By the way, this is a somewhat surprising because, again, it makes that connection to being a native of the land to something that happens in a different land. Okay, the Passover and the circumcision there, to being part of the land. But if we understand that connection, that deep connection between being part of the nation and being part of the land, okay, then it's understood. and anyone uncircumcised may not eat of it. V'chol arel lo yochal bo. Few small grammatical points. Note that the word yochal, usually with the accent on the last syllable, here has the accent on the second to last syllable, yochal bo, because it is sometimes the accent when following the last syllable, you have another accent. Here, the accent in the syllable bo, which is also a word, the accent that it was supposed to be here shifts back to the penultimate syllable. Hence, yochal bo rather than yochal bo. Okay, so yochal, the shifting of the accent. Another interesting point: how do you write laws? So, in biblical law and in ancient Near Eastern law, the more common way of writing a law is the casuistic way. Casuistic way of writing a law means that it is case law. Okay, you bring a case and then you say what happens in that case, rather than apodictic law, which we find in the Bible, but it's definitely not the common way of writing a law in the ancient Near East. In this case, we have a very good example of a casuistic law, starting with that classical word that opens a casuistic law, v'chi. Okay, the word ki, which serves various purposes in biblical Hebrew. One of them is opening a casuistic law. If so and so happens, in this case, if a sojourner lives with you, then for him to celebrate the Passover, he has to make sure every male member is circumcised, and only then is he is permitted to make that offering of the Passover. And anyone uncircumcised cannot partake in the Passover, which leads us to the next historical stage, and that is the wilderness. What happens in the wilderness? So it's a little bit of a mixed answer, because in the second year of the Exodus, okay, the second year of the Exodus, the book of Numbers describes how the Passover was done, indeed. And if you remember, this is the source for what we call a second Passover, Pesach Sheni, which is celebrated exactly a month after Passover. It's the only biblical holiday that represents second chances. Okay, by the way, the reason the only holiday that has a second chance is Passover. Why do you think the only Jewish holiday that has a second chance is Passover? We don't have that for Sukkot. We don't have that for Shavuot. We don't have that for Yom HaKippurim. We don't have that for Yom Teruah. None of these. Why do we have that with Passover?
Can I guess?
You can have an educated guess. Go ahead.
I would say because it was a commandment to remember Israel, and there was no priest involved in this when it was given. It was given to the nation, Netanel.
So I would follow your lead in the sense of saying it's a covenantal offering, right? It's something that establishes the covenant. It's something that brings you or makes you part of the congregation, part of the nation. And this is why we have a second chance for it. And indeed, in the second year of the people in the desert, we do have that Passover. Maureen, would you like to read this?
Yes, I can't see my picture. Can you see?
Your picture or the screen, you mean?
On the list of participants, I don't see my
Your
video.
picture or your name, I see both.
Do you?
As long as you
Okay.
can see the verse, that's what's important.
Yes, before I
You
read,
too.
I was, excuse me,
Go ahead.
you noticed during the time in the wilderness, nobody was circumcised for those 40 years.
That is correct. But let's start with this one and we'll get to what you said in a minute, I promise.
Vayesu et hapasa barashon.
Barishon, right?
I should know that one. Asa Yom. Lakodesh. Ben Ha'ara Ba'im Bamidbar. Sorry about this. Signar.
Bamidbar Sinai, right?
Kol Asher Zu I'm not sure.
Tiva.
Adonai et Moshe ben yes. Oh dear. Asu b'nei Israel. They observed the Passover in the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So the sons of Israel did. I was thinking that back in Egypt, if the Egyptians heard about the matter of having to sacrifice and put the blood on their doors, they couldn't have been circumcised to be able to comply. So they were kind of
You mean the
eliminated.
Egyptians themselves?
The Egyptians,
I'm not sure that
if they heard
the Egyptians themselves were not sacrificed. Some of them probably were. We have, interestingly, depictions of circumcision in Egypt as part of like the art that we know from ancient Egypt. So interestingly, this is something that we do know they did, and obviously might be related to the fact that only the choice one in Egypt did that. Only the princes and the royal, by the way, in England today, I think as well, the royal family is circumcised in England. In any way, okay, we know that for the Egyptians, when Moses is talking to Pharaoh, he says, we cannot sacrifice in Egypt because if we sacrifice that would be abomination for the Egyptians. Would they not stone us? In Exodus 8:22. And obviously they end up doing exactly that. Okay, so Exodus chapter 8 is kind of a prelude to what we have seen in Exodus 12. But again, so many things to talk about here, not our focus today. So they do the second Passover, but from that point and onwards, they don't do the Passover. Why? Because the people are uncircumcised. Okay, and it says so in Joshua. So we are moving from the wilderness to the land, to the entry to the land of Israel. And upon the entry to the land of Israel, the Passover is celebrated after this mass circumcision that is, again, pointing out the renewal of the covenantal identity of the people of Israel and the nation of Israel and its connection to the land. We've talked about being a native of the land, being circumcised, and doing the Passover, kind of the trifecta, and they all work together. So upon the entry, they do this mass circumcision, and then they do sacrifice the Passover as described in Joshua 5. Jean, would you like to read?
Let me unmute. Ki mulim hayu kol ha. I've not got my screen now. The screen is gone now.
Oh, how about now?
Yeah. Kol ha'am hayotzim v'kol. Can I have the translation?
Oh, you do. You have the English at the bottom.
It disappeared again. It's come back. Yeah, it had come back.
Okay.
For all the people who came out were circumcised, but all the people who were born in the wilderness along the way, as they came out of Egypt, had not been circumcised. Yeah, so that's what you were saying. They couldn't
Right.
before because they weren't circumcised.
Exactly.
Mm.
So for
Yeah.
40 years, from the second year, or 39 years, up until the arriving and the entry to the land of Israel, they did not do the Passover. Now that they have circumcised, they do the Passover upon the entry to the land. Again, we've talked about the connection between all of these, and it is reflected here in this verse. Gary, did you read already?
No, not yet.
So please.
Vayachanu b'nei Israel b'Gilgal vaya'asu et ha'Pesach ve'arba'a asar yom ha'chodesh ba'erev ve'arvot Yericho. While the sons of Israel camped at Gilgal, they observed the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month on the desert plains of Jericho.
Okay. Very good. And again, same time, 14th day in the evening in the plains of Jericho. Jericho is where the area of Jericho is where they cross into the land, and they again make the connection between circumcision, Passover, and the land of Israel. Moving on to the period of the kings and the judges. So, do they celebrate Passover during that period? Good question. It seems very interesting. It might not have been celebrated regularly, okay? And I want to go to two Passovers that are mentioned in regards to two specific kings, okay? One of them is King Hezekiah, who celebrates the Passover on the wrong month. Remember that we've talked about second month Passover, the second chance Passover. Do you remember we said it's a celebration of
They weren't ready for
second
that
chance.
first month.
Yes,
So
you
why
told about it.
come again?
You told about it.
Right, we've talked about it in the past. That is correct.
Yes.
So Hezekiah is, by the way, I've mentioned Hezekiah in many of the videos I did in the in many of the artifacts we've seen in the British Museum. And by the way, if you're following my YouTube, there are quite a few videos or TikTok that I've uploaded from that tour. Have you seen some of them, guys?
Yeah, thank you.
Very good.
They're good.
Okay, thank you very much.
I love to see them. I've been out on holiday in the high seas, so there was no internet or anything like that.
Okay, so when you come back, they're on my YouTube Shorts or my TikTok, and one of
Thank
them,
you.
because there are many Assyrian artifacts that are discussed, many Assyrian Christians kind of started looking at it, watching them, commenting, following. It's funny. Yeah.
That's good.
Anyway, so Hezekiah makes the second month Passover. Why? So the Bible suggests certain reasons. It might also have been done in order to kind of consolidate the people, renew that covenant, because in the northern kingdom they had a different calendar, and pushing the Passover for a month actually united the two calendars. Interesting it, and so you can see Ba'asar lachodesh hasheni, okay, on the 14th day on the second month. Okay, so interesting, which would be the second month in Judah. It would be the first month in the probably the first month in the northern calendar, and this is how he is able to bring together the two peoples, the people of Israel and the people of Judah, after the falling of the kingdom of Israel. So the kingdom falls, many of those people are about to have fallen. Many of these people come, and now the calendar is synchronized for both people, Israel and Judah. Another mentioning of the Passover during the period of the kings, we're talking about 100 years almost later, and that is the Josiah Passover. Okay, so we've seen Hezekiah delaying the celebration of the Passover to the second month. Again, the Bible talks about ritual impurity, but again, there might have been more to that. And here in 2 Kings 23:22, in regards to the Passover done by Josiah, we can see that, and I'll read this, כי לא נעשה כפסח הזה, מימי השופטים אשר שפטו את ישראל, וכל ימי מלכי ישראל ומלכי יהודה. Surely, or such a Passover was not done, had not been celebrated, was not done, was not conducted from the days of the judges, מימי השופטים, אשר שפטו את ישראל, which governed Israel, the governors, the judges, we've talked about that, nor during all the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. So very interesting. Did they practice it? Did they practice it but small scale, not a full scale celebration? That's a big, interesting question. Moving on to Second Temple period. Okay, Second Temple period. Again, the celebration is in the temple. We have a description of that celebration and how the Passover was offered in the Mishnah, the tractate of Pesachim. And people came from all over the world, a little bit like the Samaritan Passover that I've mentioned. Remember that all the Samaritans have to come this coming Friday to Mount Gerizim. So everybody had to come to Jerusalem. Okay. And indeed, during the time when the temple was still in existence, we have a description here by Josephus, not only in the Antiquities of the Jews, we have another another description in the Jewish War of the celebration of the Passover, which suggests that close to 3 million people came to the celebration. Maybe 2.7 million people attended the festival in Jerusalem. Again, that's the numbers that suggested by Josephus. Again, I'm not getting into the how and why, but it was a great celebration. That would be also the time of Jesus. For those of you who asked, this Passover type of Passover is indeed the same kind of Passover that Jesus would know. It was slaughtered in the temple, but then eaten anywhere in Jerusalem. It seems to have been also the law in regards to the day when we had the tabernacle before the temple. I'm not getting into why, but just kind of giving this as an idea. Now, what happens when the temple is destroyed? So there are certain elements that start developing during the Second Temple, and especially late Second Temple period, that become intensified with the destruction of the temple. Okay, and that is related to the idea of the Seder night, the Haggadah, and how we practice. Okay, when the temple was destroyed by the Romans, okay, Jews stopped offering sacrifices. Yes, Betsy?
Back on the previous time, just Netanel, were they still doing burnt offerings, peace offerings, sin offerings, all of these other offerings at the same time of Passover also?
Certain offerings, yes, certain others not. That is to say, there were a lot of offerings, as you've asked in your email. There were a lot of offerings. Certain offerings were done alongside, such as the whole burnt offering of every day, the special whole burnt offerings of the holy days, and then another kind of offering that is offered when you come to the temple. So other offerings were done. Obviously, that created a lot of pressure as far as the logistics. So you have some of the descriptions of the logistics of it. I'm not getting into these descriptions, but they are interesting, and they say that it looked that the priests were working in such synchronism, putting their hands, they had a row of priests kind of switching the hands with the goblets that would have the blood of the offering, so they could throw them to the temple, and that the blood of the offerings covered the whole floor up to the ankles or knees even, and so forth and so on. So it was a logistical challenge, but remember that the slaughtering itself was done not just priests. Priests had to do certain part, but not necessarily the slaughtering. So it was kind of a joint effort.
Okay. And no blood on the door once you brought your lamb home. That was done at the temple, correct?
No, the blood was spilled and spattered in the temple, but not at home.
Okay.
So the Seder, by the influence of the Hellenistic world, the symposium, if you will, started being the way that kind of people sat and talked about these things, these ideas. And the Haggadah became, over time, especially after the destruction of the temple, the central way to preserve the memory and the message of the Exodus, generation in, generation out. Okay? And so while people did do the Seder at home in Jerusalem, now people do the Seder home wherever. Okay? And the origins of the Haggadah, it's a complicated, the Haggadah as we know it was finally shaped in the Middle Ages, but its origins go back to Second Temple period, late Second Temple period. We can see these ideas and these laws already in the Mishnah, how you make a certain, the Seder night and so forth, and certain elements in the Seder night that go back to the period of the Mishnah and possibly even to the period where the temple still existed. I'm not getting into each part, but that's the idea of the origins of the Haggadah, and we basically went briefly, though, all the way from Egypt to what we are practicing today. Again, only touching certain points of history, not diving into each element. For sure we could have, but again, that was the purpose of today's discussion. I want to see you guys all in 20 minutes with a link that I sent you for the next meeting. Do you all have that link, guys?
Yes. I got
Okay.
the email.
Okay, very good. I want you to make sure you do
Yes.
have it. And I'm sending, I've put it in the chat box as well. I'll put it again in the chat box. It's important, it's even more important that when we bring someone is willing to come and talk with us, who is an expert in his field and so forth, that we show strength in number. Okay, so again, make sure you come and make sure to bring friends, tell them. I know that not everybody is
Netanel, could
available
you
and so
put
forth.
that link again someplace
yes.
here in the chat?
Yes, I'm putting it again in the chat. Just the link. You can already get into that meeting. I'll open it for us. Okay. You can forward it. You can forward the link in the